Hello, everybody. I'm Gaby Rogut. I'm speaking to you from my extremely hot Mexican border town. And welcome to this talk, How to Write About Autism While Avoiding Ableism. I have been on Medium since 2018, I recall. And one of my publications is called The Unexpected Autistic Life. I am an autistic person and I have an autistic son. And this is basically how I got involved into this topic. This publication started in November 2019. For the first months, it was just me writing about autism until little by little, it started growing. And now we have way more writers and way more followers and readers, and we are very happy about that. And the reason to create that publication and the reason I write about autism and we are having this talk is that I believe that through our writing, we can help educate. And we are trying to move from awareness of autism to acceptance. That's basically our mission. And one of the most powerful messages we can discuss is how ableism affects autistic people's lives and how to prevent that. And basically, here is how this is going to work. I'm going to talk about the topic for several minutes, and at the end, we're going to have a brief Q&A. I suggest you write your questions on the chat, preferably, and at the end, we'll answer as many questions as possible. Hello, I see someone from Medium staff here. Hi. Here we go. The first thing we need to explain is, well, what exactly is ableism? Ableism is discrimination against disabled people. It comes from assuming that disabled people are not capable, they are not competent, they probably can even make decisions about their own lives. And this affects the way we treat disabled people. For example, they are treated as children, even when they are full-grown adults. Their lives and experiences are considered less valuable. There are so many barriers they face, and it is considered too difficult and too expensive to fix it, so why even try? And that's basically what ableism is and what it can look like. And ableism is extremely normalized to the point that many times people are doing it and they don't even realize it because it's so ingrained into society, this way to treat disabled people. And there are exceptions, of course, but most of the time ableism comes from ignorance because people don't know there is a better way. And in this case, autism is a developmental disability. So autistic people also suffer from ableism. And this can happen in different ways. It can be, for example, when an autistic person is known and speaking, lots of people assume that, well, they are not even going to understand what I'm saying, so why even bother to communicate with them? Or they can assume that they are still like children, even if they are in their 50s, or saying things like, you are not autistic enough, or you are too autistic, and other kinds of derogatory language. It can also happen when we say that autism is a disease and therefore should be cured. And there are other ways we will discuss in this talk. So to fight ableism, we write. We write to express the message that we should do better. And the first thing I want to mention, the first way in which we can recognize ableism and we can stop doing it, it's how do we refer to autistic people? And here is a debate. Until a few years ago, people used to say person with autism, child with autism. This is what we call person first language. And the belief was that In this way, I was creating a separation between the person in their disability. The problem with this is that then we are assuming that disability is a bad thing. If I call you an autistic person, I might as well be insulting you. But that is not the case, because autism is the way in which a person experiences the world and how they interact with it. So why would it be a bad thing to call someone an autistic person? So now we are defaulting to identity first language. So I am an autistic woman, I am an autistic person, and I have an autistic son. So now this is the preferred way to refer to autistic people. There are exceptions, of course. I mean, if someone tells you directly, you know what, I prefer to use the term person with autism, that is their preference, and that should be respected. But unless that's the case, we should default to autistic person. And this is something many autistic activists are fighting for. So that will be aspect number one. Preferably use the term autistic person, identity first language. Number two, avoid high functioning, low functioning labels, or labels such as profound autism. What is the problem with this? These labels usually refer to how useful a person is, how productive can they be, or how easy is it going to be for us to deal with them. So we are not really paying attention to what the person needs. I'm gonna bring that up here. Excuse me. Picture this. When I say that someone is high functioning, people's mind immediately goes to the top of the scale. And many people imagine, oh, if you are high functioning, it means you don't need a lot of support. You don't need help. We don't have to do anything for you. That's awesome. And when we say that someone is low functioning, we are implying that they are not going to be as productive as we would like them to be, and it's going to be difficult to deal with them. And that's a problem, because we are forgetting about what the person needs. And this is why lots of people in the autistic community fight against these labels. There has been a bit of progress, and nowadays, this thing we call the autistic wheel is becoming more popular. And as you can see, it is indeed a wheel. And the idea behind this is that you're going to have these characteristics like social skills, executive function, and all of that. And you're going to evaluate in which grade they have it. Now, this is better. Still not ideal, but it's better in a way, because at least here we are analyzing the different characteristics a person can have. However, the way I like to think about autism is a more 3D way of sorts, and a more dynamic way. Let's take myself as an example. Imagine this is my mind, my autistic mind. I was an honored student in my school days. I did 2 majors. I was a teacher for 20 years. So for most people, I'm very high functioning. So they think I never need anything. I don't need any support. But what they don't know is that also my executive function might be very strong. I lack a lot of social skills. I struggle to relate to people. I struggle to establish routines. And that starts affecting me in certain situations. So at moments, I feel like I cannot function the way I would like to. And because I don't get many help with that, it is difficult. So I'm constantly shifting. And I hope you can see here how, just like neurotypical people, autistic people are not static. We all are constantly moving from one point to another, We are constantly having different needs, and that's what we should recognize. So if we are not going to use, or preferably, we shouldn't use high functioning or low functioning labels, what should we use? And the answer could be to be very specific. For example, we could say that a person has higher support needs. Even more specific, higher support needs in the classroom. And this tells me several things. First of all, they have needs and they should be centered. They are important. And second, that it's usually going to happen in the classroom. They're going to need additional support, additional accommodation. And this is more useful than just a level that says, oh, they are low functioning. What does that even mean? So when we are referring to what autistic people need, we should be as specific as possible. And this also recognizes the fact that each autistic person is going to be different. The autistic community is not a monolith. And we're going to go to the next point. Just checking my notes. This one is very important. Point number 3. Avoid inspiration and misery porn. What's this? With inspiration and misery porn, what happens is that the autistic person is basically being exploited for clicks or for views. Classic example, let's say that in a high school, there is an autistic student. They usually are alone, no one sits with them, no one talks to them. And suddenly, one of the kids come and becomes friends with them. Awesome. But the problem is that sometimes we see these news reports or these stories about how heroic the other kid was and how important it was that they did that. And there are interviews with the teacher, with the kid, with the kid's parents. And in the meantime, the autistic person is like a prop in the back just for decoration. And no one talks about them. What do they need? How do they feel? What did they experience? So they are not the center of the story. They are just like a decoration to uplift the other person. That's inspiration porn. There are many examples. This is one of them. The other case, which is misery porn, is when we focus on how terrible it is to be autistic, how much suffering this is going to bring. And we read stories about one family now is in poverty, the family is breaking apart, how terrible this is, autism stole their kid, and there's no takeaway, there are no lessons. No one stops to ask, wait, why are they struggling so much? What do they need? What could be done? What kind of supports? That's not important in this kind of stories because all the story is trying to do is to get clicks for misery. And this is exploiting autistic people just to gain some views. And that's part of what we should avoid. So when we write about autism, we need to ask ourselves, are we really centering the story on the autistic person, on their experience, on their needs? Otherwise, then we are not really helping. Aspect number 4, I want to mention, and this one goes especially for fiction writers. Let's say you're writing a short story or a novel and you want to include an autistic character. Awesome. The problem is that many writers go to Google and they find a list of autistic symptoms and they include all of the symptoms in their character and they make it as stereotypical as possible. And they think, wow, my work here is done. And that's not the case. As we were saying a few minutes ago, the autism community is not a monolith. There is a saying that is repeated quite frequently. When you have met one autistic person, you have met one autistic person. There's never going to be the same experience for them. So there has to be some nuance. You can't just take the list of symptoms and make that your character's personality. And one of the aspects this includes is that you will have to do research. And this doesn't mean just reading a couple of Wikipedia articles. You really have to talk to autistic people. You really have to learn what their lives are like. And this is very important. In particular, me annoys me when I reading something or when I'm watching a TV show and it's so stereotypical, the representation. Another way in which this manifests is that many autistic characters in fiction are male, they are white, they are straight. And that's your typical autistic character. And although that happens, there are autistic people who fit these characteristics. That's the autistic community is very diverse. There are women, there are people of color, there are queer people. So you really need to expand your horizons in this topic. And number 5, include autistic adults. Autism is not exclusive of children. We talk about a lot about autistic children, what do they need, what do they want, which is very important, but we forget that autistic children grow up. So in your writing, it is also important to include what are autistic adults going through, because autistic adults don't disappear when they turn 18. And many people will say it gets more difficult because in many countries, that's the age at which the supports disappear. So we also need to talk about this. How are they going about having a job? Or if they want to have a family, how is that going? How are their relationships? How is their mental health? So even though it is important to write about the experiences of autistic children, I know I have done it, you also have to write, about autistic adults and what they are going through. And probably the most important aspect we can have will be number 6, which is, and we talked about it a little bit ago, if you're going to write about autism, you need to read about autism. You need to listen to autistic people. You need to read the books, the blogs, listen to the podcasts, watch the documentaries, watch the interviews. If possible, directly talk to them. If you're writing about autism and all of your sources of information are neurotypical people, then I don't even know what you're doing. You have to go to the source. So even though it is important that you have official sources, let's call it like that, you talk to a doctor, you talk to a therapist, okay, I understand. You wanted to know more about the topic, but nothing is gonna give you more information than talking to actual autistic people because they have a lot to say. And this is very easy to do. You just go to Medium, for example, type the tag autism, and there are lots of writers who are sharing their experiences. You can go to blogs like the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, who is also doing a lot of work on that. Even in your favorite social media platform, you can find autistic people, autistic activists who are trying to spread this message. And I also want to point out how many of the aspects I just mentioned come from a lack of effort. Many people don't want to bother. They find it intimidating, they're actually scared, or they think it's going to be too difficult to understand. But the thing is that autistic people are everywhere. You are constantly interacting with us, you might not even know it. It is important to understand one another. And the truth is that autistic people are constantly making accommodations for neurotypical people. We are constantly adapting to what we need to do in order to be safe. And this is exhausting, this is difficult, and it will be good to finally find some empathy so we wouldn't have to struggle so much. And you'll find that many autistic people are very eager to share their stories, to talk with you about this, because we really wish things could change. And I could go on more, but at this point, I want to know if anybody has any questions or comments about anything I have said. Let's see. Yeah, research is so key. Yeah, research is important, and it's also important how you do it. As I was saying, it's not just reading a couple of articles. You have to pay attention. Who am I reading? Who is this author? What is their experience? Because otherwise we could end up with information that is not what we needed, or that is too stereotypical. So it's going to be very important to check our sources of information, their credentials, or where do they come from in terms of experience, so we'll really get what we need and what's going really to serve our readers, our potential readers. Let's see. I heard that there is a correlation between women finding out they're autistic or ADHD during perimenopause. Do you have any knowledge? I do not. To be honest, this is the first I'm hearing about this. The thing about being an autistic woman, and this is sadly a very common experience, is that many of us grew up autistic and we didn't know. And we found out until our own children were diagnosed. That was my experience too. And this talks of a gap in the diagnosis criteria, which is typically built for the male experience, that's true. And it's also designed for children. So if you want to get a diagnosis as an adult woman, it's gonna be difficult. And that is a problem. And that is also why it is important this representation. We were talking about that. If we keep seeing in fiction that all of the characters that are autistic are male, well, that becomes a problem in the end, because there are people who still cannot believe that women can be autistic. That's true. And we are going to keep going through this process in which we find out about that we are autistic until we have a child who also happens to have it, and we spend our entire lives not knowing this side ourselves. And once we learn the truth, we are like, oh, now a lot of things make sense. So yeah, it's important. And the fact that you're posing this question helps understand just how much more needs to be done to fully understand what's happening here. Let's see. I see other people. When you say me to, you referred that you were also diagnosed after your child? I'm curious. Exactly. Healthcare practitioners and teachers are often not up to date on how girls present. And I will argue that teachers are also not up to date on autism in general. I was a teacher for 20 years, and many of my colleagues are still, well, they were still in this state of all they knew about autism is that it exists, and that's it. And that it was scary to them, and that's all they knew. So yeah, there is more information to be needed. And I also want to say this ignorance is what worries me the most as a writer, because what worries me is that the only people who are reading about autism at the moment are people who already care, people who already they know they're autistic, or they have an autistic family member, and that's why they want to read. And the curious thing is that the people we want to reach, of course, we want to communicate with them, but we also want to reach other people who don't know anything about autism. And that's why we have to try to make our writing as interesting as possible so we can reach those people. And having a platform like Medium is a very good way to do that. What is the experience like being autistic and having an autistic son? I'm on the spectrum. My mother isn't, but I have suspected. Thank God for all. Okay. It To me, it was actually a relief, I suppose. I mean, the first moments were like a shock. But first, I was mostly worried about the diagnosis because I didn't know much about autism. So I was plagued by these questions of, oh my God, what's going to happen to him now? And when you start reading about autism, you're usually going to find first the ugly side of all of the writing available on the internet. You're going to find the misery porn, you're going to find the inspiration porn, and you're going to feel lost. And then as you keep learning and you start interacting with other people, whether it is online or in your communities, you start to see there's more. That is not all misery. It is difficult, but it's mostly because of all the barriers we had at, for example, at school. Some schools didn't even want to accept my son. And that's the difficult part, the barriers. But once you start interacting with other fellow autistic people, it gets easier. So once the initial shock went away, it was actually a relief to finally understand everything that had happened in my life. I agree with you with the being careful not to diagnose. I have been guilty of that I see someone and I think they might be, but you immediately know that it's not your place to go. I mean, I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm not going to be out there trying to diagnose people. But yeah, exactly. But yeah, I feel it is better to know. Like I understood a lot about me once I knew. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Very well, guys. We have just, oh wow, only 3 minutes left. I was so nervous. I didn't notice. Um, just to let you know, I'm going to repeat the name of the publication. It's called The Unexpected Autistic Life. Oh, thank you. Yeah, many people do not want to know. It is scary, and that's why it is important how we write about autism, because if people's only source of information about autism are these scary stories or these stereotypical stories, it, they're going to be afraid of it. They don't want to know. We prefer not to know. But if we help educate to the different aspects of autism, if we help people understand there's more in that, what we need to fight are the barriers, that if there were more accommodations, we could do better. That, I hope, will help dissipate the fear. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, we have 1 minute left. So remember, our publication is The Unexpected Autistic Life. You can find me on Medium as Gaby Rogut. I'm also on social media with the same name. And I hope we can keep up this dialogue. And I also hope that if you ever decide to write, you'll give us a chance. We really want to read you and to hear your stories. Thank you, guys. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you to Medium for giving us this space. I'll see you around.